November 22nd, 1963, 12:29 in the afternoon. President John F. Kennedy, his wife Jacqueline, Governor John Connally, and his wife Nellie are traveling in an open motorcade through Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. The next events would forever change the course of history. Explosive rifle fire rings out from a window on the 6th floor of the Texas Book Depository. The first shot misses the intended target and hits the pavement, sending bullet fragments into the limousine, striking the president and causing an initial reaction. A second shot from the book depository hits Kennedy from behind. The bullet enters his upper back, penetrating his neck and damaging a spinal vertebra in the top of his right lung. That bullet exits Kennedy's throat just beneath his larynx and tears the left side of his suit tie knot. The same bullet continues after exiting Kennedy and penetrates Governor Connally's back just below the right armpit, leaving an elongated entry wound and destroying much of his right fifth rib. A third and fatal shot is fired from the same window. This bullet strikes John F. Kennedy in the rear of his head and passes in fragments through his skull, leaving a large oval-shaped hole on the rear right side. 3 shots fired by a single gunman in under 10 seconds from 80 yards away using a bolt-action rifle designed in the 1890s resulted in one of the most infamous assassinations of all time. The events of that day in 1963 were just the beginning of one of the most varied and controversial accounting of facts the United States had ever encountered. With the death of John F. Kennedy, the nation was plunged into disbelief, denial, and despair. And immediately the world would demand to know who was responsible. Even though there were dozens of credible witnesses, including police, Secret Service, and bystanders, eyewitness accounts differed. Photos, film, and audio evidence did little to answer questions definitively. A former United States Marine Corps marksman named Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested 70 minutes after the fatal shooting and charged with firing the shots from the 6th floor of the Texas Book Depository. Astonishingly, 2 days later, Oswald himself would die at the hands of a gunman named Jack Ruby as he was being transferred from the Dallas Police Headquarters to Dallas County Jail. Were these events just the result of a bizarre series of tragic and unplanned crimes? Or was there much more to the story than the obvious? Did Lee Harvey Oswald act alone? Could one man pull off the expert shots from the Book Depository 6th floor? Who was Jack Ruby and why did he murder Oswald on live television in front of dozens of reporters and police officers? And possibly, most importantly, who would benefit from the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy? An outraged nation demanded answers, and the new president by default, Lyndon B. Johnson, commissioned Chief Justice of the Supreme Court Earl Warren to form a committee to provide analysis and final conclusions. After 10 months, the Warren Commission's official conclusions were these. Oswald acted completely alone. Jack Ruby acted completely alone. There was no evidence of any conspiracy. So why are the official files still kept secret? A third shot is fired from alongside the motorcade on a raised area next to the road known as the Grassy Knoll. This unidentified second shooter's shot hits John F. Kennedy in the head and passes in fragments through his skull, leaving a large oval-shaped hole on the rear right side. The shot is fatal. In direct contradiction to the government's official report, the United States House Select Committee on Assassination's findings conclude that shooter in the window, Lee Harvey Oswald, did not act alone. If Oswald was working with help, it begged the question. If someone else pulled the trigger on a gun pointed at President Kennedy on November 22nd, who was it and why? Who would benefit from a change in the administration? Could the obvious heir to the throne, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, have been involved in a plot that would leave him the most powerful man on earth? If a vast government conspiracy had been hatched, would they ensure their goal with a backup shooter and a subsequent cover-up? Was Oswald merely a patsy set up to take the fall? Or could organized crime families have combined efforts to wreak vengeance on a man who betrayed them after winning an election they helped orchestrate? Could the Soviets and the KGB be bent on revenge for having been humiliated on the world stage by Kennedy in the Cuban Missile Crisis? And given their track record, wouldn't a backup shooter ensure that their goal was met? Sealed records that were supposed to be released in 2018 have been postponed until 2022. Could it be that the ramifications of full disclosure are still so dangerous to world politics that revelation could impact the delicate balance of global power? Riding in the car directly behind the president, Secret Service agents did exactly what they had trained to do, namely spring into defensive action at the first sign of danger. In that second car, a Secret Service agent grabs up his Colt AR-15 to return fire coming from the Texas Book Depository. But the driver of the car he was riding in slams to a stop. As the car lurches, the off-balance Secret Service officer accidentally fires his rifle in the direction of the presidential limo. This shot strikes the wounded president directly in the head and passes in fragments through his skull, leaving a large oval-shaped hole on the rear right side. 2 shots fired by a gunman from the 6th floor of the Texas Book Depository and a final third shot fired from the Secret Service agent in the follow-up car resulted in one of the most infamous assassinations of all time. In spite of hundreds of photos, films, and eyewitness accounts, the facts remain in massive dispute. Could the fatal shot that killed the president have come from a Secret Service weapon? Is it possible that there was a cover-up that began in the accidental shooting of the president by one of the trusted men assigned to protect him at all costs? Did the agencies involved conspire to cover it up and leave the public with clean findings so that the nation could heal and do its best to return to normal? Does any evidence exist that supports this little disseminated theory? Forensic evidence indicates that the angle of entry into Kennedy's skull was a lower angle than would have been possible from Oswald's vantage point. Evidence also suggests that the fatal entry wound was of a smaller diameter than that of Oswald's rifle, and more like a round from an AR-15. Ground-level eyewitnesses report the unmistakable smell of gunfire that could not possibly have come from the Book Depository building 80 yards away and 6 stories up. The Secret Service agents were reported to have been out drinking for much of the night before. Did the Secret Service confiscate key corroborating evidence in the Parkland Hospital emergency room where Kennedy was rushed? Why were autopsy photos confiscated? What happened to forensic evidence gathered? But there remains one very troubling unanswered question. When the president, who promised the release of long-sealed JFK files in October 2017, was asked why he changed his mind, he replied, because of identifiable national security, law enforcement, and foreign affairs concerns. Which leaves the lingering question: who is still being protected decades after the fact?